Rewind to before the last election and take you back to the policy that you had then. What was the logic that drove Labor to say that retail power prices would fall by $275 if we put more variable renewable energy on the grid?
Well, as you know, Chris, that was some 2020 modelling based on an outcome in 2025. And you have followed closely, and we all read intently, that some of the developments in the global economy, particularly a major conflict in Eastern Europe, put extreme...
That happened in February, you were elected in May, the wholesale power price had gone up before.
Yeah, if you just let me finish my answer, Chris, it's not a good start. The rest of my answer is that a combination of global pressures and cost of living pressures here at home meant that we have seen that there was some turbulence in energy markets, global and domestic. And so that referred to some modelling in 2021 about an outcome next year. It's 2024 right now. In the interim, we're providing 2 loads of energy bill relief. Every household will get $300 off their energy bills in the second half of this year. At the same time as we get the longer-term building blocks in, recognising that the cheapest source of new energy is renewable.
Is it? Because is that how electricity is priced on the marketplace? Isn't it priced by the highest cost of generation, not the lowest cost of generation? As we saw last night, was cold, still night, the price of electricity went to $350 a megawatt hour. So isn't the entire equation wrong?
No. And my colleagues will no doubt take the opportunity later on to talk about this in a bit more detail. I think every serious person in this conversation recognises, first of all, we need new capacity, and second of all, when it comes to new investment in the network, the cheapest form is renewable. And that's what our policy is based on. And Chris Bowen will talk to you all about this later this morning. I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well. But our approach is the economically orthodox, economically sound approach. It's consistent with what a lot of other countries are doing in the context of this global net zero transformation.
But it's not the way that electricity is priced, though, is it? So in the end, we're going to pay the total system costs for electricity, aren't we?
Well, one of the things that we are paying the price for right now is the fact that much more capacity came out of the system than went in under the life of the former government. And we are paying the price for that. I think that's self-evident, that is clear. And so once you come to that conclusion and you accept our responsibility to add more capacity to the market, to the grid, then you work out the way that makes the most economic sense, and that's what we're doing.
So is the trajectory of electricity prices under your plan going up or down?
Well, we've seen in the most recent data that the prices have stabilised. I think some of that recent data was very encouraging. I've already acknowledged in, I think, your first question, that there was a lot of volatility in energy prices. That was one of the reasons why we've got this inflation challenge in our economy. But the most recent pricing data has been more encouraging. Our responsibility is to give that near-term relief, and we are. Our responsibility is to add more capacity to the network, and we are. And our responsibility is to grab the big economic and industrial opportunities in the world, and we're doing that too.
And as you add more generation, which is variable, you have to add more transmission lines, and isn't 40% of everyone's retail bill transmission costs? So isn't the price of electricity on the way up from here?
This is the key motivation for our Rewiring the Nation policy. You know, we recognise that there's a generation challenge that has been exacerbated by a wasted decade. There's a generation challenge and there's a transmission challenge. And Rewiring the Nation is about addressing the transmission challenge in our economy. And again, to do that in the most economically responsible way.
But it does add to the cost of an electricity bill, doesn't it?
Well, in every system, part of the cost is transmitting the electricity that is generated.
So prices
in every
going
system.
up. But the thing I'm trying to get to here is that there is no future at the moment, either your policy or the coalition's policy, under which the price of electricity returns to sort of $50 a megawatt hour. It's not going to happen, is it?
Well, I can only refer you to the answers I've given you already. First of all, very encouraging recent data about the price of electricity. Yes, we need to deal with generation, we are. Yes, we need to deal with transmission, we are. Every country has some combination of these challenges. The difference is we've got a better almost unique combination of advantages which will help us deal with it.
But if the trajectory of electricity prices is up, and that's the long-term trajectory over the last decade or so, can Australia afford to be a high energy cost economy and a high wage economy and compete in making things like solar panels?
Well, we are providing energy bill relief, so everybody will save $300 on their household electricity bill from the second half of this year into the first half of next. That's the first point. We understand this is one of the pressures that people are under. That's why we did more than acknowledge that in the budget. We responded to it for the second time, and that's been important. And we also know we've got to add more transmission, we've got to add more generation. We're doing that too. Every country has some combination of energy challenges. As Michelle quoted you in the introduction, I think you're broadly right to say energy is absolutely fundamental to everybody's economic prospects. The difference for us is we've got a different combination of advantages and we are leveraging them to respond.
But it's the nature of the technology that you're using is variable, so it's off more than it's on. So what you have to do is support it. What you use to support it mostly now is going to be gas. And so gas will be a price setter in the marketplace. And as long as the price of gas is high, the price of electricity will be high.
Well, we've taken steps on the gas front as well to recognise and respond to higher gas prices. You know, at the end of 2022, we took some decisive action that not everybody loved, but which was effective. And we have recognised, in engagement with industry and elsewhere, that there's a role for gas. That's what our future gas strategy is all about, you know, helping to firm renewables and in other ways. But our job is to recognise that there's a role for gas at the same time as we can add much more renewable capacity to the system, because that's the cheapest new source of energy.
Isn't the problem, though, we've hit the pinch point right now? You said there are 280 gigawatts in the pipeline. That's proposed. It's neither committed or anticipated. In fact, what's in the system at the moment is 4 gigawatts. By 2026, we're losing 4 gigawatts, and it's not like-for-like replacement. So aren't we right now facing a tipping point in the grid?
Well, we're starting, unfortunately, way behind where we would like to because of all the capacity that was lost over the last decade. We're upfront about that. And we need to add much more capacity. And from my point of view as the country's treasurer, and Chris will have a perspective later on as well, my job is to try and make sure that we are attracting as much private capital and private investment in this challenge as we can. And we're doing that in a number of ways.
And you said $250 billion. I've seen lots of different figures. Net Zero says $1.7 trillion would be needed by 2030 and $7 trillion by 2060. Who's going to pay that money, and how do they get a return? Who will pay the people who invest?
Well, first of all, I think in the circles that I move in, the investor circles I move in, global and domestic, and in the business community that I engage with enthusiastically in all of the parts of this country, people see this as a big opportunity. You know, they don't share your scepticism, Chris, about this. You know, I engage with many people here, including from businesses, you know, who have traditionally been involved in leveraging some of our more traditional economic strengths over a long period of time. And people see this as an opportunity. And yes, we will need heaps more investment. You're right that there are a lot of different forecasts and assessments of what it will take. But what they all agree, and what I agree with, is that public funding can only be a sliver of it. And so as the Treasurer, my job is to work out how do we get best value for money. How do we use public funding to attract private capital and private investment in better informed and better designed markets? And that's been my focus.
Now, people keep talking about being a green energy superpower. At the moment, we are an energy superpower. We export 25% of the world's metallurgical coal and 20% of its liquefied natural gas. The Pacific would like us to stop doing that. You're a Queenslander, a Treasurer. Is it Australia's intention to stop exporting fossil fuel?
I think those commodities are an important part of our export offering. And I acknowledge privately and publicly in groups big like this and in small groups how important our resources sector is to our national prosperity. And I see in particular critical minerals as being the opportunity of the century. And I am very open about that. You know, resources has been a central part of our economic history, and it will be a central part of our economic future as well There's no net zero without the Australian resources sector, and my job is to make sure we leverage those advantages and make ourselves indispensable in areas like critical minerals, but also in some of these other export markets.
So just finally, I see an integrated services plan, integrated system plan, which, as you say, is coming out next week. The draft's already out. It has gas in the system, using more gas than we use today through until 2050. And Chris Bowen has said there is no place in the future fuel system for gas in his speech at the last COP28. So there is clearly a place for fossil fuel in the energy future.
Well, I refer you to our future gas strategy that we released in the lead up to the budget. We did that very deliberately. We know that there's a range of views about gas in the broader community, but we know that gas has an important role to play in firming renewables and in other ways, and our future gas strategy recognises that. And again, to finish, to sort of embroider some of the points that I made in my speech a moment ago, if you think about the way we're going about this, turbocharging the private sector, better design and better informed markets, relying heavily on tax breaks, a rigorous treasury assessment, in all of these ways, what we're doing is the economically orthodox, middle-of-the-road way, which is consistent with the conversations I have with so many of you and in the investor community and here and around the world. And you can contrast that with the sort of madness that we will hear later on, which pretends that you can get energy prices down in 2024 or 2025 by building nuclear reactors, a decade or more into the future. I mean, nuclear, if you take all of the ideology out of it and you just focus just on the economics of this nuclear fantasy, it costs more, it takes longer, it will push up prices, and it will squander all of the advantages that we have as a country, the combination of advantages which put us at the very front of the pack in economic terms over the coming decade will be squandered if we go down that path.
We must make an end, but I'd say this. China is the industrial powerhouse of the world. It's got 55 nuclear reactors. It's going to build 150 of them in the next 15 years. So should we send a delegation to China to tell them they've made a mistake?
Well, two things about that. First of all, China doesn't have our combination of advantages, right? And we shouldn't squander those, right? The second thing is, your argument would make it seem like we should do everything that China is doing. And my view is if you started with a blank piece of paper, Chris, and wrote down all of our advantages, industrial, resource-based, our skills, our human capital base, our attractiveness as an investment destination, our friends in the world, if you did all of those things, then you would come to the conclusion that we have come to. Which is we have a remarkable opportunity in this country to leverage our traditional strengths at the same time as we build a deeper and broader industrial base in this country, and we would be mad to squander that opportunity.
We've kept you longer than we should, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.